Artist or antagonist? Verdi has bursts of marvellous passion. His passion is brutal, it is true, but it is better to be impassioned in this way than not at all. His music at times exasperates, but it never bores, whereas George Bizet and many other fans view in the composer Giuseppe Verdi. Verdi was infatuated with his art, the opera. His passion for composing music was stronger than all of his other emotions, and this showed prominently in his opera Rigoletto. It premiered at the La Fenice in Venice, Italy, in March 11, 1851, but not without any trouble in the production of the opera itself. There were many disputes between the Italian government and Giuseppe Verdi in the making of Rigoletto, but the opera would become one of the most famous operas ever and affect the course of history. Giuseppe Verdi was born on the 10th of October in 1813, in the town of Roncola, Italy. Roncola was a small village in the province of Parma, which had only 4,000 residents at the time. His father ran a small inland farm, and his family was middle class. His father tried to give Verdi the best education that he could, but it was rather difficult in such a small town. Verdi began taking music lessons at 4, and could stand in for his music teacher at his church beginning at the age of 9. Soon he started composing music of his own, and performed it in the town church, in which he gained his first fan in Antonio Baresi. Baresi was a merchant and a music fanatic. He took Verdi in as if he was his own son, and sent him to Milan to study, in which he was taught about politics, literature, and most of all, opera. Later, Verdi would study with Vincenzo Larina, who was a composer himself and an associate of the La Scala Opera House. Once he completed his studies, Verdi stayed within Milan, teaching and composing music, even publishing a set of music he had written. Eventually, he accomplished the deal of having one of his operas he had written performed at the La Scala. The opera was called Roberto, and as average as it may seem nowadays, it was good enough for Verdi to be able to have 3 more of his operas performed at the La Scala. This was the start of Verdi's career. He continued to work himself like a galley slave, producing opera after consistent opera. Although Verdi loved his art of the opera, he often felt like he was forced to produce these operas for money when he just loved writing out the music itself. After producing 16 consistent operas, it came time for Verdi to create his next opera, but he couldn't find his inspiration. He went through idea after idea, story after story, yet none attracted the musical genius. That was when he came across the script for Victor Hugo's Le Roi s'amuse. Le Roi s'amuse, the King's Fall, in Verdi's mind was the greatest subject and perhaps the greatest drama of modern times. Going over various subjects in my mind, Le Roi came on me like a flash of lightning, an inspiration, and I said to myself, yes, by God, that one can't go wrong. Verdi quickly grew anxious to adapt the French play into an opera, but he knew from the start that the subject matter would be hard to get approved by the government censors. Le Roi s'amuse was written by Victor Hugo, who also wrote The Hunchback of Notre Dame. It was about the escapades of King Francis I, who was known for his exploits with a young woman during his reign. The play also features his hunchback jester Triboulet, whose daughter the king was seduced within the play. Whilst Victor Hugo mainly focused around King Francis I, the French government noticed that Hugo also insulted France's current king at the time, King Louis-Philippe, so the French censors banned the play after its first performance in 1832. The play had been banned for 20 years when Verdi discovered it, and still had 30 more years of prohibition. Verdi requested for the opera to be produced nonetheless, simply because he was so passionate about the subject. He had planned for the opera to revolve around a curse that caused much pain for Triboulet, therefore named the opera the Italian word for curse, the Maledizione. However, Italy was under Austrian rule at the time, so the censors were very harsh. The response that Verdi received was that His Excellency the Military Governor Chevalier de Grozowski directs me to communicate to you his profound regret that the celebrated Maestro Verdi have not chosen some other field to display his talents rather than the revolting immortality and obscure triviality forming the story of the libretto La Maledizione, the Curse. His Excellency has decided that the performance must be absolutely forbidden, and wishes me at the same time to request you not make any further inquiries in this matter. But Verdi was stubborn, and was determined to have his opera performed. Knowing of Verdi's strong will to create the opera, the censors and Verdi began to debate about what aspects of the opera were to be kept, and what to dispose of. The censors had a long list of what they wished to be rid of, and Verdi agreed with almost none of them, as he felt it would destroy the opera itself, making it incomprehensible. However, Verdi was correct, as one of the censors' requests was to completely remove the end of the third scene, where Triboulet finds his daughter dead in the sack that was meant to contain the king. The censors felt it was very taboo, and that it was too risky, but Verdi fought and argued with the censors, pointing out that it would completely destroy the climax of the opera, forcing the censors to eventually give in and permit the end to remain the same. The only change made was that the body bag was laid upon the floor instead of carried over Tribolet's shoulder upon the streets to be thrown into a river. The censors also requested that Tribolet become a normal man instead of a hunchback, which was an idea that absolutely revolted Verdi. His response to this change was that I believe it would be very beautiful to depict this character, externally deformed and ridiculous, as inwardly full of passion and love, and that I chose the subject precisely because of these qualities and these original traits, and if they are recut, I shall no longer be able to set it to music. The censors were once again defeated by Verdi's relentless attitude. The censor's final main request was that the king be demoted and that the opera not take place in France. To this Verdi yielded, after only a small bit of arguing, knowing that he was already pushing his luck with keeping the opera as intact as possible, deciding to change the King of France to the mere Duke of Mantua. With only a few more small changes, like the name of Tribolet to Rigoletto, coming from the Italian verb to laugh, Tribolet's daughter Blanche became Gilda, and the assassin Saltabadil and his sister Maguelone became Sparfusile and Maddalena, the opera was completed under a new name, Rigoletto, after its title character. As Verdi sent his final draft to the censors approximately a year later, they approved of it grudgingly, and all in good time as well. It was only a month before the opera was to be performed, so Verdi immediately sent off a copy to the director of the opera, announcing that at last yesterday at 3 in the afternoon our Rigoletto reached the director safe and sound, with no broken bones and no amputation. As the performance date of Rigoletto grew closer, the talk of the opera grew. Verdi even began to advertise it, saying that, "It seems to me the best material I have yet put to music is Rigoletto. It has the most powerful situations. It has variety, vitality, pathos. All the dramatic developments result from the frivolous, licentious character of the Duke. Hence Rigoletto's fears, Gilda's passions, etc., which gives rise to many dramatic situations." Soon the night of Rigoletto's premiere came, and the opera enchanted people with its sad story of a father who loved his daughter above all things. Rigoletto became one of Verdi's masterpieces, and the first masterpiece of his middle years. Rigoletto has now grown to be one of the most famous and frequently performed operas ever. In a study where the number of performances an opera put on from 1998 to 2000, Rigoletto came in at number 11 out of 52. Rigoletto had been performed an astonishing 410 times within a 2-year period. From Rigoletto also came what may be Verdi's most famous song from any of his operas, La Donna è mobile, The Woman is Fickle. The song was performed in the final act of Rigoletto, when the Duke is attempting to seduce Maddalena, the assassin's sister, who is secretly a part of the plan to murder the Duke. It is also the song you hear being sung in the background when Rigoletto has the bag with the body he believes to be the Duke's, alerting him of the fact that the Duke is still alive. This forces Rigoletto to cover the body in the bag and discover it is really his daughter who is dying within the bag. As Verdi wrote the music to La Donna è mobile, you could just tell from the rhythm that it would be the most popular song from Rigoletto. He told Raphael Murat, the first man to play with the Duke, that if Verdi even caught him whistling the tune outside of the practice for the opera, that Verdi would fire him. La Donna è mobile has now been used in many other popular movies, such as The Entertainer, 1960, Step Brothers, 2008, and The Punisher, 2004, and has been parodied in popular cartoon shows like Futurama and Simpsons. It has even been featured in the popular video game Grand Theft Auto 3. The controversy itself about the creation of the opera with the Austrian censors also managed to change history. Italy was famous for its art, especially its operas, so the fact that the Austrian censors did not want Verdi, the current king of opera, to have Rigoletto performed, meant that Austrians now weren't only limiting Italians' personal freedom, but their artistic freedom as well. The argument between Verdi and the censors took place in the middle of Italy's 2 revolutions against Austria's rule, in 1848 and 1859, giving those who participated in the revolution another reason to fight the Austrians who were controlling their country. Once they were free, Italy began to unify itself again to make it into the country it is today. Rigoletto is easily one of the most important and interesting operas to have ever been created. If it had not been created, then Italy would be very different, as well as the rest of the world. The fact that Verdi frequently butted heads with the Austrian government created a result that would make great contributions to the history of opera in Italy, whether it be through song or debate.